I knew she was cheating. I was told by the wife of that idiot she was fooling around with. Gloria, my wife, was cheating on me with a truck driver. How did I know? The wife of the asshole truck driver told me. How did she know? The asshole truck driver told her. Why'd he tell her? He didn't know. His name is Ralph Godwin. His wife's name is Janice Godwin, and like most modern people, they both had cell phones. They also had a laptop computer that they shared. His job allowed him to drive around town, which meant he was home every night. When he got home, he and Janice, like most married couples, would have dinner and then sit around waiting to go to bed. Sitting at home, he monopolized their laptop, spending hours playing games and surfing the internet. She, like her husband, enjoyed playing on the computer, but it seemed to occupy most of his time. She liked putting together puzzles. She found a website that featured them and was almost addicted to them, but he didn't like sharing his laptop. She told one of her friends about it, and the friend advised Janice to buy an iPad. She could do puzzles and not worry about the laptop. Ralph could have it. So they bought her a tablet. Their cell phones were in his name, so he added her iPad to his account, and everything went well. They were both happy with their jobs. Their home life was fine. They entertained once a week or so. He had his laptop and she had her iPad. One evening, shortly after she got her new toy, he was in the living room playing on the laptop and she was in the bedroom. She took a shower, got into bed, and turned on the iPad. It turned on, but it wasn't the puzzle she was working on, but a series of text messages. She started reading them and didn't immediately realize she was reading her husband's messages in real time. It was obvious that he was texting a woman, and just as obvious that she was texting him back. It wasn't hard to guess that the two were having an affair, especially when he told her he would meet her at the same place the next day at the usual time. Janice lay there puzzled, reading what they were going to do to each other. She quietly got out of bed and went into the living room where she saw him talking on the phone. "What are you doing?" she asked. He jumped up. "Texting with the dispatcher about tomorrow," he said. She went back into the bedroom and picked up the clipboard to see him informing his mistress that they were almost caught. She put the clipboard down, climbed under the covers, and began to cry. She was still sobbing when he came in, but she didn't want him to see her, so she tried her best to stop. He got into bed and stayed lying on his side, not trying to snuggle up to her or kiss her good night. She was glad he didn't. After making sure he was asleep, she got up and went to the living room where she spent the night on the couch. It was a night spent thinking. By morning, she had made a decision. She was going to sit on the sidelines and figure out who this woman was before she did anything about it. It took less than a week to do so. She learned from their messages that her name was Gloria and that she worked as a waitress at the local truck store where Ralph had breakfast several times a week. The day after she learned the name, she went to the truck shop and looked for a waitress named Gloria. It wasn't hard to find her since she was wearing a name tag. Janice took a seat in her section and ordered a cup of coffee. When she brought it over, Janice asked if her last name was Johnson. "No, Morris." "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I knew you," Janice said. Janice immediately went home, opened her laptop, went to Facebook, and found Gloria Morris. She found that Gloria was married to Paul Morris, which is me. From there, she went to my social media page, found where I worked, called me, and asked. "This is Paul Morris," I replied. "Mr. Morris, my name is Janice Godwin, and you and I need to talk." "Why, Mrs. Godwin?" "I can't discuss this over the phone, but it concerns your wife." "How exactly does it concern my wife?" "As I said, I won't discuss it over the phone, but I'd be happy to meet with you at a place and time convenient to you." "Mrs. Godwin, unless I have some idea of what you have to say, I will not meet with you at any place or time." There was a pause. "So, if you have nothing more to say, she's having an affair with my husband," Janice whispered. "I beg your pardon? My husband and your wife are having an affair. Are you sure you have the right man?" "Yes, then perhaps we should meet." I invited her to come to my office immediately, which she did. She showed me texts between Gloria and her husband, but nowhere mentioned Gloria's last name, so I figured it could be anyone until she showed me a text where her husband mentioned Gloria's place of employment. That caught my attention. Some of their recent posts had mentioned the stupidity of both Janice and me. The problem was what to do and how to do it. Janice and I discussed it and came to the conclusion that we were both in no danger of divorce, but maybe we should get a little revenge first. Not to have fun in revenge, neither of us thought that was a good idea, but perhaps to mess with their minds. It was obvious from their messages that what they were doing was just to scratch an itch, not for some long-term relationship of the let's elope, get married, and live happily ever after type. This, in my opinion, made their affair worse. If they had fallen in love, that would have been one thing because you can't help who you fall in love with. But that wasn't the case with them. It was just sex, which made both Janice and I feel that she and I had done something in our marriage to make our spouses feel the need to seek entertainment elsewhere. We were both deeply hurt by this. She and I discussed the possibility of getting revenge, but in what form should we do it? We decided to think about it for a couple days without letting our spouses know we knew about them. In the meantime, her little iPad kept tabs on them. There was no meaning or reason for their meetings. They just met whenever the opportunity presented itself and always at the same motel. Janice called the next day to say that Ralph was finishing work early and sent Gloria a text asking if she wanted to meet. She agreed, and the meeting took place. Janice had read enough of their messages to know what motel they were staying at, so she and I met there and waited in my car. Gloria arrived first and walked to the office to arrange for a room. Janice and I stood outside the office and about 3 rooms away. When Gloria came out of the office, Janice and I hugged and kissed. I looked out of the corner of my eye to see if Gloria had noticed us. She had seen. Gloria tried to hide her face, hoping we wouldn't see her. Back at home, I undressed and took a quick shower. I rarely showered during the day. Gloria walked in a couple minutes after I was done, and it was obvious what I had just done. Apparently, the sight of Janice and I had discouraged her from doing it that day. She asked why I took a shower after lunch. I said I just felt like it. She tried to start a normal conversation but didn't know how to do it. Finally, she stuttered, "What did you do today?" I grinned. "Oh, nothing. I took a couple hours off work to meet up with a friend, huh? Who? No one you know. Why didn't you tell me you were leaving? We could have done something together. I didn't think you'd be interested. You seem to have other things on your mind lately. What makes you think that?" "Oh, just a hunch." For the rest of the evening, she stuck to me like glue. She happily made dinner and afterward asked me to sit next to her on the couch instead of in the chair. When I agreed, she snuggled as close to me as she could. I took her hand away, stood up and announced, "I'm going to bed." "Good," she said. "That's exactly what I've been dreaming about." "Not tonight," I said. "I don't feel like it." I pretended to be asleep as she walked over to the bed. She touched my back, but I moved away from her. That night I slept the sleep of an exhausted man. Janice told me the next day that she had virtually the same reaction from her husband, and she did exactly the same thing I did. 3 days later, Gloria and Ralph met again at the motel. Thanks to Janice's iPad, we found out about it and did the same thing as before, only this time, Ralph saw us. Once again, they both almost beat Janice and I to it, and the same events happened at our house that evening. I laughed as I got out of the shower because Gloria was there and asked again why I had showered after dinner. I came up with some lame excuse that I knew she wouldn't believe. Judging from their texts that evening, the glamour of their affair was waning, and they were beginning to blame each other. Gloria told him that if he hadn't insisted on seeing her often, she could have spent more time with me because, after all, she loved me, not him. He, in turn, blamed her, saying she was the one who wanted more sex. He insisted that he loved Janice and would never leave her. He then inquired as to how Janice and I ever met in the first place. This started a long discussion between the two of them about how we met and why we should even be doing this with each other, since we were complete opposites and had nothing in common. We played this game for another 2 weeks and always managed to stop them from doing it, which pleased us and frustrated them. Not only did they not have fun at the motel, but they didn't have fun at home either. Indeed, neither did we. Eventually, they gave up. They both decided that their affair was over, and they both wanted to work on their marriage, but Janice and I decided it was too late to save them. The same day they ended their affair, they were both served. Gloria and I stayed home. I knew it was coming and sat in anticipation. She kept trying to strike up a conversation with me, and I ignored her until the doorbell rang. She answered it, and I watched as she was handed the papers. She turned and looked at me. "What's this?" she asked. "You know what it is. I'm divorcing you for adultery. You can't do that. I just did." "But you were—" I interrupted her. Watching you and Godwin, Janice and I never did anything. We just dated so you could see us and think we were having an affair, but we weren't. You and him, on the other hand, met every chance you got. Judging by the motel records, you've been meeting at least once a week for the last 6 months. How did you find out? We've been so careful. Careful? I laughed. Everyone in the parking lot knew about you, too. You can't keep secrets like that from people who like to gossip, and your fellow waitresses like to gossip. I led her to believe that one of her coworkers had snitched on them. I didn't want to reveal how we actually found out. We might still need it. She sat down on the couch. Can we talk about this? She waved the divorce papers in my direction. Talk all you want. Justify yourself all you want. But none of this will do you any good. You cheated, and I'm divorcing you for it. Paul, it didn't mean anything. We did it for fun. That's all it was. Fun? You cheated with another man for fun? That's even worse. Thank you, Gloria. That makes me feel a lot better, I said sarcastically. That's not what I meant. Of course you did. What else could you have said? It was just sex. That's the second worst thing you could have said. I recommend you get a lawyer. It will be a few months before we can go to court. But before then, we need to sort out the distribution of assets. In preparation for that, I canceled both credit cards and divided the money in both accounts. You keep the old accounts, and I keep the new ones. I did the same with investments. Your phone should have been disconnected an hour ago. The house belongs to you, so I'm leaving. I'm moving my stuff over to Tony's. As I left, I put my copy of the house key and garage door key on the table. The last thing I heard was Paul. Paul, please, I'm sorry. Tony was my best friend. He and his wife Sophia owned the best pizza and stromboli restaurant in town. I was godfather to their 2-year-old daughter, Diana. When I arrived, my room was ready. There was no excitement. We just dropped my stuff off at the house or garage and then had dinner. My first night there was strange. Gloria and I had been married for 4 years and had lived together for a year before that. We had slept in the same bed no more than a dozen times over the years. I couldn't find sleep until almost dawn. The next workday seemed like a week, and the next week seemed like an eternity. Gloria called me when she got her own cell phone. After she called me 6 more times wanting to talk, I blocked her number. Janice had the same problem with Ralph. He wouldn't stop calling her, begging her to forgive him while she read his messages to Gloria, trying to convince her to let him move in with her. She kept refusing, insisting that I was going to move back in with her. She kept telling him that all she had to do was get me to listen to her. She was sure that would happen at our first meeting with the lawyers. She was wrong. At the first meeting, she kept insisting that we talked privately, and I kept refusing. Eventually, I walked out of the meeting. Let the court figure it out. I told my attorney, I'm not talking to her. 3 months after serving her with divorce papers, we ended up in court, and everything came out exactly as it does in most cases. The property was divided in half except for her house, which she kept with everything in it. She did not contest the adultery, and I paid no alimony. The immediate aftermath of our divorce case was different. Janice Godwin sued her husband, Ralph Godwin, for divorce on the grounds of adultery. The divorce was granted, and she received the house and alimony. She and I had dinner that night, and she brought me up to speed on their correspondence. More specifically, about their lack of correspondence. Apparently, they had had a big fight and hadn't communicated in over 2 months. Ralph, however, was doing it with another waitress at a truck stop. 2 months after our visit to the courthouse, the divorce was final. Getting the decree was anticlimactic because I felt divorced when the judge banged the gavel. The decree only gave official status. I thought about dating but didn't do it. I spent more time at work and with my goddaughter, Diane. I really enjoyed spending time with her. At the same time, I felt I was tired of hanging out with Tony and Sophia, so I started looking for a place to live. I found an apartment with no furniture and rented it. We had a store in town run by a charitable organization, and I bought used furniture there. The store was run by volunteers, and the sales clerk who ran the till tried to recruit me. I laughed and asked if they were trying to recruit all their customers. She laughed and replied that they were. So I had a minimal furniture set, and they delivered it the same day, but I still needed a bed. The local mattress store took care of that, but couldn't deliver the bed the same day, so the first night I slept on my couch. A month went by, then another. I heard that single men have a good time on ocean cruises. Rumor has it that many single women go on cruises to find suitable men, so I started reading about cruises. I found out that indeed many women go on cruises, and the ships are great places to hunt for bachelors. If you are middle-aged or older, I was nowhere near middle-aged, so I decided to forego the cruise. I needed another dresser, so I headed to the used furniture store again. When I left the store, the same cashier was there. She didn't remember me, but I remembered her. "Are you still recruiting volunteers?" I asked her. "Yes, we are. Are you interested?" "That depends on what I'm volunteering for." "Lots of things. Do you know how to drive a truck?" It was the wrong question given my recent history with Ralph Godwin. "Absolutely not," I replied and started to get out. "Wait, stop. We have a lot of other things we need help with." There was something in her voice that made me turn around. "Like what?" I asked. "Do what I do. Work the cash register, or you could unload trucks." "You don't have to drive," she quickly added. "There's work in the sorting room. You can move things around on the floor, sweep the floor. All you need is a desire to help people. And who do I talk to?" She smiled. "The office is in the back. They can sign you in." Without knowing why, I walked back to the office. Behind the desk sat a woman in her 90s who asked if she could help me. I learned that she was the store manager secretary. "I understand you need volunteers," I said. She visibly brightened. Before I knew it, I had talked to the store manager, Arch, whom I didn't like, and got a schedule of work loading and unloading trucks. I could only work on Saturdays, so I was scheduled for that particular time. We had 2 trucks, and when we got a call that people wanted to donate large furniture or appliances, a truck would pick them up. I rode in one of the trucks and helped load and unload. I didn't see the woman who helped me recruit until the 3rd Saturday. We had just gotten back from unloading stuff, and she came out to see what we had brought. She didn't recognize me even after I introduced myself. She'd only seen me twice, and then for a minute or two, so I shouldn't have expected her to recognize me. She said hello to the driver and introduced herself to me. "Hi, I'm Susan Blake, but everyone calls me Susie," she said as we shook hands. "Hello, I'm Paul Morris, and we've met before," I said. "Met? Where?" "At your checkout twice. You were the one who asked me if I wanted to volunteer." "Oh yes, I remember now." I knew she didn't remember. She just wanted to make me feel better. "How do you like it so far?" "It helps me stay off the streets," I told her. Over the next month, I saw Susie 2 more times. Both times we smiled and said hello. 2 more months went by. I had one date with a woman I met where I did my laundry. It started with us having drinks after work, but then moved on to dinner. We had fun, but there was no spark or other dates. My truck driver, Joseph, and I were doing a pickup in an upscale area of town. They were going to be remodeling and wanted to buy new furniture. They had some really nice stuff, and their daughter was there to watch us. She also helped us, I guess, to get us out of the house faster. I stooped down to pick up my part of the dresser, and she came up behind me, carrying a drawer from the dresser. She was talking to her mother over her shoulder, didn't notice me, bumped into me, and tripped. With a great cry, she fell to the floor and face first into the drawer. I tried to help her, but she brushed my hands away, called me a clumsy fool, and ordered me out of the house. I tried to protest, but she couldn't stand it and ordered me out again. So I went. I barely had time to get into the truck before Joseph opened my door. I saw what happened. "Come on, let's get their shit out of the truck and leave it here. We don't need it that badly." We had just removed the first piece and set it on the driveway when the homeowner came out. She apologized for her daughter. Joseph wasn't moved by it. "We don't need to be treated like second-class citizens," he told her, "and we don't need your furniture so you can have it. Besides, it was her own fault she fell. She should have watched where she was going." She stood and watched as we unloaded a few items, put them in the driveway, and drove away. When we returned, Arch, the store manager, was waiting for us. He said our services were no longer needed, and Joseph and I went outside and had lunch and a couple beers each. In the evening, my cell phone rang. I didn't recognize the number and ignored it. The caller left a message. "Hi, this is Susie Blake. I just found out what happened, and I'm really embarrassed. I don't think I would have handled it the way you and Joseph did, but I wasn't there. Our general manager has asked me to ask you to speak with her on Monday if you can. Her office is at 10.15 if you can make it. I'm here if you need anything." I decided I didn't need anything, especially their unpaid volunteer work, and didn't bother to respond. Besides, I was working and couldn't just leave the office to attend some meeting with a stranger. It was around this time that I started looking for a house to buy. Susan Blake called me back on Tuesday. She informed me that the owner of the furniture we left in the driveway had called to apologize for her daughter's behavior. She still wants to donate the furniture, so she will pay a company to move it. This will save our staff from having to go back and move it. She was also going to send a large donation. Looks like all's well that ends well, and we expect to see you on Saturday. I called her back. I don't think I have the character to volunteer, so I'll decline to return. She expressed regret, but made it clear she understood my position. An hour later, my phone rang again and again. I didn't recognize the number, but the message was, "Mr. Morris, my name is Cynthia Roman. I'm the CEO of United Industries. I'd like to speak with you, please. I won't talk you into coming back and volunteering with us again, but I would like to discuss what happened and try to understand it. I can come at a time that is convenient for you." I ended up calling her back and making an appointment. Since I was working, we were going to meet at her office after normal business hours. It turned out that I liked Cynthia Roman. She explained the company's business plan to me and told me how important donations, especially quality items, were to their survival. She explained that the company is a 501c3 organization, meaning it is a nonprofit, tax-exempt, and survives on donations. It is the sale of merchandise in their retail store, combined with monetary donations, that allows them to support the underserved children in our area, and other than her and 2 other employees, no one else in the organization gets paid. She told me that selling the furniture Joseph and I left in the driveway would provide 2 tutors for an entire semester for 4 children. We can't afford to lose donations like that. Fortunately, the homeowner saw what happened and didn't blame you and Joseph. In fact, Joseph told me that the idea of leaving the furniture was his. The following Saturday, I was back in the truck with Joseph again. He said he probably overreacted. I was back a month later when Cynthia Roman saw me. "Mr. Morris, do you have a minute?" she asked. "I do," and we walked to the front of the truck. "Can I ask a personal question?" she asked. "Sure." "Are you married?" I grinned, not anymore. "Was your wife's name Gloria?" "Yes. Ralph Godwin is my brother. Roman is my name, though I'm no longer married. We just stared at each other. He's an asshole, and I'm sorry for what he did to you and your wife." After recovering from the slight shock, I spoke to her. "You have no reason to apologize. None of us can control the actions of our asshole relatives, and all families have them. Anyway, I'm sorry Ralph did what he did." 3 weeks after that meeting, I closed on the sale of my new house, and Cynthia and I had our first date. Then a second. 2 months after she told me her brother was an asshole, Cynthia Roman and I got into it. We were both very happy with our relationship for about 6 months. One Saturday, Joseph and I had no pickup, so I decided to wash the truck. I was in the back of the building and was just about finished washing the truck when I heard a man's voice. "You're in trouble, you son of a bitch." I turned around and there stood Ralph Godwin. "Why?" I asked. "You're messing with my sister. I'm not messing around with your sister. We're dating." "Dina, the only reason you're dating her is because you want to get even with me. You're full of shit. We're dating because we like each other. At least neither of us are married. I'm warning you, stay away from her. And I'm warning you, stay away from me," I said. And as I turned to continue working on the truck, I saw a head poke its way into the building. I assumed they had overheard at least part of the conversation between Godwin and me. I looked over my shoulder. Godwin was gone. Cynthia called me 15 minutes later. "Is it true?" she asked. "Is what true? That my brother was there? Was? And you talked to him?" "Yes." "And what did you say to him?" "He accused me of contacting you to get even with him. I told him that you and I were dating because we liked each other." "That's it?" "Pretty much." "Why? Are you sure it wasn't the other way around? You didn't tell him you were only seeing me to get even with him?" "No, that's what he said." "I didn't. Someone overheard you say that." "Well, that someone either misheard or is lying. I've known him for a long time and he's never lied to me before. Does that automatically make me a liar?" There was a pause. "I don't want to see you anymore, and we don't need your services anymore." "Wait, Cynthia." But she was gone. I went inside to see if she was there, but she wasn't. Susie was standing behind the counter. "Which men are working today?" I asked. "Thomas and Arch." "Why? Where are they?" "Arch left for lunch just a couple minutes ago. Thomas is running an errand. I left all the truck cleaning supplies where they lay, got in my car, and drove home. I tried to call Cynthia, but my number was blocked. I knew Arch and didn't like him. He was a toad, and no one trusted him. No one but Cynthia. He was the store manager and one of only 2 people on staff besides Cynthia who got a paycheck. The other was his secretary. They were the only full-time employees. Everyone else worked voluntarily and only a few hours a week. After a couple days, I gave up trying to talk to Cynthia. One evening, a few weeks later, I was grocery shopping and ran into Susie. She told me that she had become the temporary store manager because Arch had been fired. Cynthia overheard him telling someone on the phone that he got you fired by lying about you. She confronted him and he told her the truth about your conversation with her brother, she said. I told her the whole story, starting with my ex-wife and Cynthia's brother and ending with Cynthia telling me she didn't want to see me anymore. Wow, that's quite a coincidence, Susie said. Yeah, but that's all in the past now. We chatted for a few more minutes, and she left. Another month went by. I decided to buy new furniture for my house. I called Susie and told her I had some furniture to donate and asked if anyone could pick it up. She said they had a truck, but only a driver. They didn't have anyone to help with loading and unloading. I told her I would help, and they sent Joseph over with the truck. We got everything loaded, and I followed him into the store. We chatted as we unloaded and took the furniture into the store. Cynthia was there, saw us, and came over. "Can I talk to you?" she asked me. Joseph apologized and left. I didn't say anything. "I made 2 mistakes, and I'm sorry," she began. "The biggest mistake was the first one. I believed Arch and not you. The second mistake was that I didn't come to you right away when I found out he lied. I was embarrassed and ashamed, and I didn't know how to start apologizing." I looked at her, and she looked back. Our eyes locked together, and neither of us wanted to look away, but we were forced to do so when the cashier called Cynthia and she needed her. "You can't handle it?" "Ask Cynthia." "No, ma'am, we need you." She reluctantly excused herself and went to the cash register, and I was left pondering what I should say or do, but did I want to be alone and lonely when she was trying to get my forgiveness? She came back. "Paul, I'm sorry, but this is an emergency. One of our trucks just had an accident. Can I call you, please?" I nodded, and she hurried away. 3 hours later, she called. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yes, the new driver hit a wall. There's no serious damage and no one was hurt." She paused. "Can we talk, Paul, please?" "Why don't you come over and grab a bite to eat?" I asked. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I got the slices, cheese, and condiments out of the refrigerator and put them on the table along with some bread and 2 bottles of beer. We made sandwiches and ate in silence. No further conversation or apology was needed. Once we were done eating, we took the second beer to the couch and sat down. She ended up snuggling up against me, and I didn't mind. What's more, I was enjoying it. We didn't stay like that for long before we had our first kiss. Then the second. Then further and further, and we got down to it. In the evening, it started again and lasted almost as long as the night before. For another 4 months, my life was almost perfect. Cynthia and I were discussing which one of us would move in with the other. We had just about decided that she would move in with me and rent her house when Jonah showed up. Jonah and Cynthia had been friends for most of our lives, and his sudden appearance changed our lives. He had spent the last few years digging for gold in Alaska and apparently was moderately successful. He and Cynthia met while on a grocery shopping trip. They got to know each other. He asked her to have dinner with him, and she agreed, figuring it would be fun to spend time with an old friend. When she told me she was going with him, I agreed with her that it would be fun for both old friends to spend time together. I just didn't realize how much fun it would be. That dinner was followed by another and another and another. Soon, she and I stopped talking altogether. We never talked about ending our relationship. It just died. My life went on, but I really missed the companionship that she and I had. One Saturday, I was driving near the store and saw Joseph filling up his truck with fuel at the gas station next to the store, so I pulled in there. We exchanged pleasantries and chatted for a few minutes. When he was done filling up, he asked if I had talked to Cynthia lately. I replied that I hadn't. He said she was pregnant and her boyfriend was back in Alaska. I told him I didn't care and realized I really didn't care. What she does with her life is up to her, and I am no longer a part of it. True, I wondered briefly if she was going to move to Alaska or if he was going to move back to town. Joseph told me that Susie occasionally mentions me. The store had a new permanent manager. This position was offered to Susie, but she declined. She had no desire to work full-time. One day I was buying groceries and felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning around, I saw a very pregnant Cynthia. "Hello, stranger," she said hi. For a couple seconds, we just stared at each other. "You've gained weight," I said. Before she could speak, she turned a pale shade of pink. Yeah, I guess I have. There was a pause. How are you feeling? Not too bad. How about you? Same. The silence was deafening. Well, it was nice to see you again, I said, pushing the cart away. Paul, would you like to have dinner sometime? I didn't fail to cast a glance at her belly. I don't think so. I'm afraid another old friend will show up and ask you to have dinner with him. It was a mistake, Paul, and I'm sorry. Besides, I added, what would Jonas say? I don't know. I haven't seen him in a couple months. Does he know you're pregnant? Knows. When he found out, he went back to Alaska. That's too bad. Well, I have to go. Sure, it was good to see you again. Maybe we... I distanced myself from her and never heard her words again. Another couple months went by with no dates. Once in a while I saw trucks in town, but not Joseph, Cynthia, or Susie. One day I was in a meeting and my boss announced his imminent retirement. He didn't elaborate, but we later learned that his wife was ill and he wanted to spend time with her. He introduced us to his deputy, a man I had heard of but never met. His name was Fredrik Johansson, and he invited his senior and mid-level employees to a party at his house the following Saturday afternoon. His house looked familiar to me as I drove up to it, at Neck. I had just had time to have a drink and chat with one of my coworkers when a young woman about my age approached us. Hello, I'm Christina Johansson, Fredrik Johansson's daughter. She shook the other coworker's hand, then took mine and looked at me. Don't I know you? She asked. We've met before. I said I didn't know and immediately apologized, set my drink down on the nearest table and headed for the door to leave. I hadn't gotten far before I heard her words again. I remember now. You're the guy who made me trip and fall. I turned to her. I didn't do anything like that. You weren't looking where you were going and you tripped. Bullshit, she said. I ignored her and walked away. I headed straight for my office. I figured I'd clear my desk and get everything I wanted before security escorted me out Monday morning. Sure enough, as soon as I walked in on Monday, I was told that Mr. Johansson wanted to see me. I went to his office and was immediately sent there. You left the party before you had time to eat, and this morning I saw in the videotapes that you came in on Saturday. He smiled. Didn't your daughter tell you? Yes, but I want to hear your side of the story. It's very simple. A few months ago, I was at your house picking up some old donated furniture. When she tripped and fell, she accused me of tripping her. I assumed that when you found out who I was, I would be fired. So I decided to come in and get all my personal belongings. Fredrik Johansson started laughing and stood up. He stretched his hand across the table. Paul, I want to shake your hand. All I keep hearing about is how some bumbling SWAT guy tried to kill her, and it gets funnier every time. I held out my hand and we shook it. And it was even funnier when she said you were at the party, but you don't look at all like the ogre she described. He leaned back in his chair. Sit down. Sit down. Fredrik Johansson and I talked for over an hour. Mostly it was about the company and his plans for it, but something concerned his daughter. My wife has seen everything and agrees with you that it's all Chris's fault. But like she has her whole life, she tries to blame it on others. Tell me, why did you work for them? Don't we pay you enough? It was my turn to laugh. My paycheck is never enough, but it was volunteer work and I only did it on Saturday. Okay, good. I'd like everyone who can do volunteer work. Are you still doing that? And I told him about my time there. He laughed again. You're a smart guy, or you wouldn't be where you are now. As you probably know, that charity you volunteered for hires tutors to help kids with learning problems, but they need unpaid volunteers too. People who will work in the office and schedule tutoring sessions. You will find that most tutors stop taking a paycheck after a short time working with kids, but the paycheck is used as an incentive to get them involved. I would like to open one of the administrative offices right here with us, and we could be a corporate sponsor. I would love for you to help organize this office. Only you won't be volunteering. You'll be doing it as part of your regular job. That means you're busy now, but you'll be even busier later. What do you think? I think I need to think about it. Sure. Take as much time as you need and tell me by next Monday. He grinned. I was leaving his office and someone was leaning over his secretary's desk. She straightened up, turned, and faced me. Our eyes met and she flashed me a look. You're the clumsiest asshole I've ever met, she said. Me? Do you ever look where you're going, or are you always like a bull in a china shop running around willy-nilly, willingly? What kind of expression is that? It means haphazard, something you are obviously intimately familiar with. I suggest you get a guide dog to keep you out of trouble. They're smart enough to watch where they're going." I heard laughter and turned to see Frederick Johansson standing in the doorway of his office. "Call me, Paul, and let's get started," he said as I left, and I was busy most of the rest of the week and had little time to think about his plan. I figured that since it was his favorite project, I could earn a few brownie points if I did it, but then I thought that would be wrong. Monday morning, I sat outside his office, still undecided. It wasn't until I saw him face to face that I realized what my decision would be. I walked straight to his desk and stood up. "So, Paul, are we going to do this case?" he asked. "Yes, sir, we will." At that very moment, I made my decision. "Good for you," he said. "Oh, shit," I heard from behind me. "Dad, I can't work with him." I turned, saw her, and asked what she was talking about. "Sit down, both of you." We sat and looked at each other. "Paul, Chris has been doing this for a long time and knows what we need and how to do it. Chris, Paul wants to help, so I suggest you to kiss and make up and come up with a plan to help these kids. Do I make myself clear?" I looked at him and started to withdraw my agreement, but he's a smart man and knew how to stop me. "This isn't about ego, Paul. This is about kids who deserve help if they want to succeed in this world." "Yes, sir. I completely agree." "Good. Now, give Thompson all the information you can. I've talked to him and he knows you can bring it. Then I suggest you spend some time with Chris and find out what she needs from you. Have I got that right?" "Yes, sir, and yes," Dad sounded simultaneously. We walked out of his office and stood in the waiting room saying nothing to each other. Finally, I spoke up. "Where's the best place to work? I suppose in the conference room. I'll bring some files for you to look at and get an idea of how we work. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9. "Okay." And she was gone, but not before tripping over the edge of the carpet and nearly falling. She glared at me. "Don't say a word." I didn't. The next morning, she brought in several boxes of documents on a two-wheeled cart. We set up in the conference room and worked relatively peacefully all morning. We had lunch, ate lunch separately, and then worked all afternoon. At the end of the day, she said she would be back in the morning to continue working. I informed her that I had real work to do and that I would call her when I had more time to work on the tutor project. On Thursday of that week, I called her and asked if she was free the next day. She was free and we worked as we had before. This went on for 2 weeks. She and I worked 2 days a week, relatively peacefully. The next week, she suggested we talk to one of the sources of funds we had. I agreed and she scheduled us for lunch. I was surprised when Cynthia showed up at the restaurant. A very, very pregnant Cynthia. I had forgotten all about her. Chris introduced us, and Cynthia told her that we already knew each other and that we were old friends. It was actually Paul who left the furniture in your driveway, you probably remember. "Oh, I remember, but I forgot it was your company. I just sat there while the two of them discussed budgets, goals, tutors, and other nonsense. When they were done and we were ready to go, Cynthia asked if I had seen Susie. No, should I have? Not necessarily. She's dating a really nice guy. Good for her. We chatted some more before Chris and I were in my car heading back to the office. "Is that your baby?" she asked. I looked at her. "What even prompted you to ask that?" "I know you entertained her, so I assumed that—" "How do you know that?" "I saw the way she was looking at you." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means she wants you again. Not in this life or in any other. How did she do it? Did what? Pissed you off?" "I don't think that's any of your business. If you don't tell me, she will. So be it." A long pause followed. "The Susie she was talking about. Is that the Susie who works in her store?" "Yes." "Did you entertain her too?" "What's the matter? Are you jealous?" "Ha, jealous. Don't even think about it. Susie and I were just friends." There was a pause before she spoke again. "I don't see a ring. Are you married?" "No." "Have you ever been married?" "Yes." "Have you?" "No." "Why did you get divorced?" She cheated. The rest of the drive to the office passed in silence. After that, everything changed. We'd worked well together before, but now it was even better. She was attentive and thought most of my ideas weren't bad. I even started to like her, and I began to find excuses to spend more time with her. Eventually, I couldn't handle the double workload, so I went to my boss and told him about it. He told me to work with Chris, and he would make sure my other work got done, that it would just be another couple weeks of hard work, and then I could handle it in 5 or 6 hours a week. Chris and I started meeting on social media. Dinners, dances, piano bars, everything but sex. I tried a couple times, but I was explicitly told it wasn't going to work. However, our time together remained fun until it wasn't anymore. We finished with planning the project and discussed how to tell her father that now only one person was needed to run it. She left the conference room and her father called wanting to see me, so I headed to his office. I was just starting to walk into the reception area to bring him up to speed when I heard her voice. He must not have any social skills or he wouldn't have lost 2 women, I heard Chris say. Really? I recognize the voice of Mr. Johansson's secretary. I feel sorry for him, so I'm spending time with him to boost his self-esteem. Good for you, he's a really nice guy. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, and a good-looking one too, Chris said. He's funny, smart, and fun to be with. He just needs a little work. Christine laughed. Yes, he needs a little work. At that moment I walked in. I knew they were talking about me, and they looked up when I walked in. God, I'm so glad my self-esteem is okay. I feel sorry for that poor slob you were talking about. For a second I thought it might have been me, but I realized what you, Christine, would have told me if I needed a little work. Oh, shit, Paul, I'm sorry, But speaking on behalf of the men of the world, thank you for your efforts on his behalf. I know he would thank you himself if he knew what you were doing for him. I looked directly at Christina. Since you're so worried about the other guy, you don't need to spend any more time with me. You can focus on him. She stuttered slightly and blushed. I came to see how your father is doing. She tried to speak, but only sounds came out of her mouth. With those words, I walked into his office and she followed at my heels. Oh, good, you're both here, he said. How about an update? I started before she could. We've reached a point where only one of us is needed, and since Christina is experienced, I think it should be her. That way I can get back to my regular job. Do you agree, Chris? He asked. She looked at me for a moment before answering. I guess. I didn't look at her, but I felt her gaze on me and saw him shift his eyes from me to her. He wasn't in this position because he was stupid. Okay, you both take the rest of the day off. I'll think about it and let you know on Monday. Chris, could you stay for a minute, Paul? Have a good weekend. Thanks. I was out of the building in less than 5 minutes. It would have been very easy to stay home that weekend and feel sorry for myself, but I didn't. My best friend Tony and his wife Sophia were going out of town and asked if I wanted to watch my goddaughter Diana. Of course I agreed, packed an overnight bag and headed to their house. It was a fun weekend. I did what godparents and grandparents are supposed to do, pamper my charges, and then return them to their parents. We did whatever she wanted until Sunday evening when her parents returned and I headed home. Christina tried to call me 6 times on Friday afternoon and evening, as many on Saturday, but only twice on Sunday. I didn't feel like going to work on Monday, but I didn't want to put off the confrontation either. As I usually did, I went to my office first to clean up everything I had time to do over the weekend and then to the conference room. She was already there and working, so I turned around and went back to my office. Just before the end of the workday, I was called into her father's office. She was already there. Okay, I've made up my mind. Chris, she's all yours. Paul, you go back to your regular job, but I want you to help Chris as needed. I also want you to help her hire more tutors and find more kids who need us. There are plenty of both here. Let's find them and get them together. We confirmed his decision and walked back to the conference room in silence. There I began to close out my part of the work and explain to Christina her condition. She nodded, but said nothing. Finished, I walked to the door, opened it, and started to leave. Paul, I stopped, turned, and looked at her. I'm really sorry about that. I didn't mean what I said. I looked at her. No interpersonal skills, Christine. Do you have any idea how hurtful that was to hear? And then to hear that you were only spending time with me because you felt sorry for me? I shook my head. Other women just broke my heart. You destroyed my soul. There were tears in her eyes, and she sobbed before I could get out the door. I spent the rest of the week in my office playing catch-up and never saw Christina. It went on like that for the next month. I buried myself in my work and paid no attention to anything else. Then I was invited into Mr. Johansson's office. Paul, I have a situation, but first I want to tell you that the work you've done with Chris has been great. There are already some early results, and it looks like a lot of kids are going to get a lot of help. Thank you. I'm working on the next step and will probably be asking you if not for help, at least for your participation. Thank you. Now for my situation. Robbie Singlal resigned today, so I need a manager for the planning department. The position requires someone with an MBA. You don't have one, but on the one hand, you have talent, knowledge, and leadership skills. On the other hand, if I promote you above a few others, I will be accused of favoritism because of the fact that you worked for me on the side and because of the rumors about you and my daughter. I had heard that rumor, and 2 guys in my section had even talked about it openly. I thought so little of it that I didn't even react to what they said. So I'm between the hammer and the anvil. You and I both know there's nothing between you and her, but the rumors never seem to be able to be quelled, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Mr. Johansson was originally from the rival company Barnes. Even when he was their CEO, they were trying to recruit me, and I had received offers from them as recently as 2 weeks before that meeting with him. Let me ask you a hypothetical question, I offered. The Barnes company has offered me to join their staff as head of planning. It's the same position you're talking about here. You have at least 2 qualified candidates for the position. Why don't I accept Barnes's offer? It would solve a couple of problems. Hell no. Barnes will get a better offer, so that option is off the table unless you resign, which I hope you don't. For a while, we sat in silence. What happened between you and Chris? I thought you 2 were getting along great. I chuckled. As you know, it wasn't where we started, but we managed to become a little friendlier for a while. So what happened? She won't talk about it. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. Okay, to hell with it. As of today, you're the new head of the planning department. That makes you the youngest head of any division this company has ever had. Human Resources will discuss your new salary and benefits, and you'll move into Singlub's old office. It's the only corner office on the 7th floor. I think you'll like it, and you can keep his secretary or find another one. Let operations and logistics know if you want to make any changes. Thank you. I'm honored. Don't thank me yet. You're going to work your ass off. And by the way, department heads with spouses or guests have dinner at my house on Friday at 6.30. Black tie. I'll be there, but I don't have a spouse or guest. Good enough, he said. I arrived at his place at 6.15 and was escorted into the living room. I took the proper deprecative and began wandering around the house, chatting with the other guests. Looking into the dining room, I saw that each seat had a nameplate. The plaque to the right of my seat had Christina Johansson's name on it. I was looking at it when I felt someone's presence next to me. I looked, and it was her. My mom is a stickler for seating boys and girls at formal dinners, so I was seated. I beg your pardon, I will say as little as possible. She and I didn't speak for the rest of the appetizer, but I was starting to feel a little awkward ignoring her, so I started making small talk before we were even done with the salad. I glanced at her a couple times and wondered why I never noticed how attractive she was. After dessert was served, she left, and I didn't see her again for the rest of the evening. The first month at the new job wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, and I began to relax a little. One morning, my secretary came in and said that Christina Johansson had called and asked for a meeting. I've set up a meeting with her for tomorrow morning, but I'm wondering if she needs it or, being who she is, she can just show up. My first thought was that the rumor mills were still working and had gotten to my secretary. What do you mean by saying she is who she is? I asked. There was nothing in her voice or demeanor to indicate that she meant anything other than what she said. I didn't realize that being the CEO's daughter gave her special privileges. I grinned. Do you think it should? She grinned back. Absolutely. Then I think so too. Call her back and tell her she can come in any time and I'll see her as soon as I'm free. Her smirk turned into a laugh and she returned to her desk. The next morning at the appointed time, Christina was announced and I stood up as she walked in. Good morning, I said, indicating for her to sit down. What can I do for you? You remember Cynthia from the thrift store? Yes, I do. You thought I was the father of her baby. She blushed. I didn't think that. I was just wondering if that was the case. So what about her? She wants to have a barbecue for some of her biggest partners and asked you and I to attend, so I was wondering if you could be available. I started to say something, but she interrupted me. Paul, please don't say anything like, wouldn't I be embarrassed by your lack of social skills? You know I'm not, and I regret saying it. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. I can't explain why I chose those particular words, but I wish I hadn't. I guess I was just trying to make myself look good in front of Daddy's secretary, but I said it and I can't take it back. I can only apologize. I looked at her. She was trying to hold back tears. When I asked, she told me, and I checked my calendar. I was free. I'll meet you there, I told her. She started to say something else, but decided not to. The day of the barbecue came, and I was there. Joseph took care of the grill, and Cynthia and Susie shared the hostess duties. When Christine arrived, Susie held our hands, introduced us to the other partners, and raved about our contributions to the program. Christine knew most of the people in attendance. Once I figured I could get away with it, I headed over to where Joseph was grilling hamburgers. We were chatting and sipping our beers when Susie joined us. "What's up?" she asked. "Great. How about you?" "Not too bad," she replied. We chatted until Christina joined us. "Can I get you another drink?" she asked. "No, thank you. I've done my duty and I'm going home." I took the last sip of my beer and tossed it in the nearest trash can. Went over to shake Joseph's hand, said goodbye to him, Susie, and then Christine, and started to walk away. I was almost to my car when I felt a tug on my arm. I turned around. It was Christine. "We need to talk," she said. "We don't have anything to talk about." "Yes, there is." I said I was sorry for what I said. It's not true, and I regret saying it. Good. Apology accepted. Now we have nothing to talk about. I left before she said anything else. Sitting next to her at dinner, looking at her and recognizing her good looks was one thing, but I still had words for her. He must have no social skills or he wouldn't have lost 3 women. And I feel sorry for him, so I'm spending time with him to boost his self-esteem. Were seared into my psyche and I feared would stay there for a long time. For 3 months I had nothing to do with her. My office was on the same floor as her father's, but at different ends of the building. I heard she was assigned an office on the 5th floor where the accounting department was located, so I saw her rarely. One day I was riding the elevator downstairs. I was the only one in it, and it stopped on the 5th floor. The door opened, and there she stood. Looking inside, she saw me and stepped back. "I'll take the next one," she said. I reached out and opened the door. "This is crazy. Get in here." She got in and we drove to the garage in silence. We each had our own parking spot. Mine had my name written on it and hers had reserved. We walked to our cars in silence. Another month passed. I was sitting in my office when my secretary introduced 2 police officers. She grinned broadly. "Mr. Morris, you must come with us." One of the officers said. I was stunned. "Why?" "Because of the tutoring program, someone signed a warrant for your arrest and you have to stay in custody until bail is posted. The tutoring program held fundraisers and some bogus arrests were made until family and friends of the arrested person donated enough money to post bail. I was not allowed to post my own bail. I laughed and went with them. They led me to a store and told me to sit in a sectioned off area with the other arrestees. The deputy mayor and one of the most popular local TV personalities were already there. The TV personality was doing a remote broadcast as part of her arrest to promote the fundraiser. She started interviewing me and asked me who arrested me. I have no idea. "Well," she said, pointing the microphone in my face, "this is your chance to ask your family and friends to donate enough to get you out of here." I laughed, took the microphone, looked into the camera, and made a plea to anyone willing to listen. However, they didn't tell me how much I should raise. Our jail area had plenty of food and drink, comfortable seating, and every 15 minutes we were each told how much had been donated in our name. I was having a good time, and the TV host, whose name was Julie, and I were having fun. Every 15 minutes she would go live and ask people to donate bail money to her. I had been there for a couple hours when Susie walked by, saw me, and started laughing. "Who arrested you?" she asked. "I have no idea." She stood there and we chatted for a couple minutes. After a couple minutes, I heard the bailiff say, "You're free to go, Mr. Morris." Under it, Julie handed me a business card with her cell phone number on it. "Give me a call and we can talk about doing time together." I smiled and walked out. The same 2 police officers who arrested me took me back to my office. I have a separate entrance, so surely my secretary only became aware of my presence when I informed her of it. I usually went out and got a cup of coffee. I had already opened the door to do just that when I heard her talking. It was so funny when they came to get him. He was laughing the whole time and wanted to know who arrested him. A pause. "No way. I wasn't going to tell him it was you. He would have killed us both." Pause. "No, I haven't heard anything about him." When are you going to bail him out? Pause. Yeah? When? Then she laughed. No, I haven't seen him, but I don't think he'll agree. Pause. Well, good luck. Let me know what happens. She finished talking and started to work, but looked up and saw me. Oh, you're back. I smiled, confirmed that I was indeed back, turned and went to my office. I had just sat down at my desk when she walked in and stood up. Was everything okay? She asked. Sure it was. It was almost fun. She grinned. Christina told me she was going to arrest you for charity. She said she'd pay your bail if you agreed to have dinner with her. Unable to resist, I laughed and said there was no chance of that. Her phone rang and she went to answer it, leaving the door open. No, he was actually laughing about it. A pause. I think the case is lost, Christina, but it's up to you. Goodbye and good luck. She got up, closed the door, and went back to work. The next day, the department heads had a meeting with Mr. Johansson. Christine was in his waiting room as we left. Paul, do you have a minute? She asked. The other department heads looked at me. Two of them smiled as we left. Let's walk down the hall. We walked out of her father's office complex and down the hall. I'm glad you weren't upset yesterday. I thought it was funny, I said. She smiled. I figured if I bailed you out, you'd have dinner with me and I could apologize again for my stupid comments. Another apology isn't necessary. Let's just forget about it. In that case, why don't you have dinner with me after all? I stopped, looked at her, and pronounced it. The short answer is no. She looked at me. That's final, isn't it? She asked. You're never going to go out with me, are you? No, I won't. You have to realize that I'll never know for sure if you're going out with me to make it up to me, or if you really want to date me. We stared at each other for a long time before she nodded and walked away. 3 months passed, and I only saw Christina in glimpses as we walked through the building. I called Julie, the TV reporter, and we started dating. We got into it on our 3rd date and 2 or 3 times a week after that, but we were just buddies. This was approaching, and Mr. Johansson was throwing a party for his department heads. I was there for about 30 minutes, and overheard Mr. and Mrs. Johansson talking in the kitchen as I passed her on my way to the bathroom. She won't come down while he's here. I told you not to invite him. Jesus, Lucy, he's one of my best people. He has a planning department that's way ahead of projections. How could I not invite him? Besides, I like him. Let's just screw it up, that's all. What did I tell you about your language, Fred? I'm sorry, but your daughter's language got her in trouble with him at least twice. Is it any wonder he wants nothing to do with her? I know, but she really likes him. That's too bad, but I'm on his side. But she's your daughter. Can't you do something about it? Like what? Fire him if he won't go out with her? No. For heaven's sake, Lucy, go and take care of our guests. And at night, I went back into the living room and forgot about the bathroom. I was talking to one of the guests and his wife when the Johanssons came in. I made it through the rest of the party but kept glancing up the stairs wondering if Christina would show up. But she wasn't there. A few more dates with my buddy, Julie, a few more times in the hay, and I started thinking about Christina more and more. It was Christmas Eve, and I was just about to spend the evening with Tony, Sophia, and Diane. I was sitting in my car and pulling out of the garage when a car pulled into the driveway next to me. I got out of the car just as Christina got out of her car and walked around to meet my gaze. She spoke first. What do I need to do to convince you? We just looked at each other. What do I need to do to convince you that I didn't mean what I said? But I'm just a woman who likes a man and wants him to love her back? I looked up into a face smeared with makeup from tears and realized that she didn't have to do anything to convince me. She just did it. You can come with me and spend the evening with Tony and his family. She smiled. Really? Let's go. I walked to the passenger side of my car, opened the door for her, and enjoyed the side of her legs as she got in. We sat on her side during the ride, and neither of us, engrossed in thought, spoke. We spent time with them when we went out, so they knew each other. Tony and Sophia, however, were a little surprised to see her. It was an evening of good food and laughter as Diana entertained us with her antics. She was allowed to open one present and was delighted with the dollhouse that was in a large box. After she was put to bed, the 4 adults sat around and enjoyed drinks while we collected toys for Diana that Santa was going to keep while she slept. On the way to my house, Christina was still on her side of the car. At my house, I invited her inside and we sat and talked until 2 a.m. Christmas morning. I walked her to her car and took her out to dinner the day after Christmas. I spent Christmas alone, but the next day, Christina joined me for dinner. We had dinner together 3 times that week and spent New Year's Eve watching old movies, eating popcorn, and washing it down with drinks. The next couple of weeks, we spent almost all of our free time together. During the 2 meetings with her father during that time, he and I never once spoke privately, but I did see him looking at me a few times. Valentine's Day was the first time we did it. We were at my house, sitting on the couch watching a movie. I thought about it for a long time and decided it was time. Up until that point, she was the one who had made all the moves. She was the one who apologized at least twice. She was the one who arrested me for the tutoring program, hoping I would have dinner with her. She was the one who came to my house asking what I needed to do to get her to like me again, and I decided it was my turn to take the lead. We sat side by side on the couch. I wrapped my right arm around her and she pressed herself against me. If I thought it happened fast, it went even faster from there. In less time than it takes to describe, we moved toward my bedroom. My ex was good, as was Julie from television, and Cynthia was excellent. But Christina was head and shoulders above them. If she tried to prove a point or convince me that she was truly sorry, she succeeded. The Monday after that marathon week of fun, I was called into her father's office. "Looks like the rumors have started again," he said. "Huh? What is it this time?" "Cut the crap, Paul. Before I fire you, I need to know how long you're going to do this." "Do what?" "Make Christina pay for what she said. She really thinks you've forgiven her, but I'm not so sure about that. I've seen the way you do business, and you're pretty rough. I'd hate to think you're leading my daughter down a dead-end path." "Mr. Johansson, nothing could be further from the truth. As you know, she is a very good woman, and my intentions toward her are only honorable. Moreover, I am sure I am in love with her." This discouraged him. "Well, I don't think I expected that. Have you told her?" "No, sir. The thing is, I didn't realize it myself until I told her." He smiled for the first time. "Funny how that happens." "Yes, sir, it is. So what now?" "I guess I'll clean up my desk and go talk to Barnes, see if they can use me." He stopped smiling. "Why would you do that?" "Because you said you were going to fire me." "That was then. This is now. Go back to work." That spring, Christina and I vacationed together. We flew to Greece and cruised the islands. The following Christmas, I proposed to her. 2 days later, we had dinner with her parents, and for 7 years now, we've had dinner with them at least once every 2 weeks. 4 years ago, we gave them their first grandchild, and last year, we gave them their second grandchild. We are not going to give them any more. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.